So next, number 6, we're going to talk about Edwin Diaz. And Edwin Diaz comes over in a trade between the Mets and the Seattle Mariners. The trade brings them not only Edwin Diaz, but also Robinson Cano. They trade away a package of players and prospects. The biggest names of that player prospect group were Jay Bruce and Jarred Kelenic. And there's really nobody that the Mets are really that, sad about parting with in that trade, except for Kelenic, who was a huge prospect and a guy who many saw as a potential all-star going forward. A little bit more on Jarred Kelenic later, but the main acquisition here is bringing in Edwin Diaz. Robinson Cano is basically a throw-in in this. It's pretty funny to say because he's making like $30 million a year during this time, but Edwin Diaz is the prime acquisition. He is a elite reliever coming off an amazing 2018 season. He posts this terrific year with Seattle in 2018 where he saves 57 games. He is widely viewed as baseball's best reliever. He wins the Mariano Rivera Relief Man of the Year award, and this is a terrific job that is done by him. He finishes the year with a 1.96 ERA, most notably 124 strikeouts and 73 innings pitched. He establishes himself as essentially the new Mariano Rivera in a very short matter of time, and is now looked at as arguably baseball's best reliever. And this is in 2018 when there's still probably a lot of contention about whether or not he, Aroldis Chapman, Craig Kimbrell are baseball's best reliever. But he's coming off this incredible year where he is just widely viewed as this sensational reliever who can really transform the Mets bullpen group. And what follows is one of the worst seasons by a closer in Mets, not only Mets history, but maybe in all of baseball history. It's one of the most insanely destructive seasons I've ever seen. In 2019, he goes 2-7. He finishes the year with 26 saves. I'm amazed he even gets 26. He blows 7, all in spectacular fashion, where you're like, how did he even blow that save? And this was just kind of Diaz's MO that year. And it all falls apart for him very fast because he's pitching at a very good clip in the first half of that 2019 season, and the second half he just falls off a cliff. And I remember it happening very distinctly, like in real time, how badly he was performing, and he almost single-handedly blows the entire Met division wildcard race that year. The Mets were in it. It was a good 2019 Met team, and just a lot of blown saves during that point, especially against critical opponents. Against the Nationals, he was blowing saves. It's not a good look, and he is, after one season, almost ran out of town. And this is a common theme with a lot of the Mets on this list, is that their first year is almost a complete aberration. It's like what happened to them that first year, and not everybody acclimates to the best ways when you first come to the New York Mets. And some people have played in New York City before, maybe with the Yankees, but when you come to the Mets, there are certain expectations, and unfortunately, the fans can be very judgmental. And I've certainly been guilty of that as well, where you look at a guy and say, this is his body of work for 2019. It's terrible. He had a horrendous season that year, and a lot of people wouldn't have been particularly upset if the Mets had just cut bait at that point and said, let's trade him off while he's still young. Maybe he still has some value to other people. They stick with him. He's in the mix in 2020, although he effectively loses the closer role for a period of time in 2020 because he starts blowing saves again, and he does it almost immediately in that abbreviated 2020 season. But he's quickly given a reduced role. This doesn't stick along for more. He doesn't stay in this reduced role for a large portion of the season. He ultimately finishes the year with 6 saves, blows 4 of them. So he's 6 for 10 during that time. So not great. 60% save rate, not really what you want from your closer. It does pitch remarkably better during this point. He finishes the year with a 1.75 ERA, 50 strikeouts, 25 innings pitched. A big shift is the fact that his walk rate is going in the completely wrong way. He walks 14 batters in just 25 and two-thirds innings during that 2020 season. So he's got an incredible strikeout rate, 50 strikeouts to 25 innings pitched. That's roughly for two strikeouts for every innings he's pitched. So that's an incredible run for him, and he is pitching more like himself when he was pitching in 2018, and but not quite as good. And the following season kind of cements that like maybe he's not this all world reliever that we assumed, because in 2021 he actually has a really rough season. And by rough season, I say this is a season where he should have pitched better. The peripherals are still kind of coming wrong in his favor. He does settle down remarkably well in terms of giving up home runs. He's giving up a lot more hits than he normally does. He's getting tagged for a lot more earned runs. Unfortunately, runners in scoring position do play a factor here, and he just does not do well with leaving guys on. And he's finishes with 32 saves, blows 6 of them. He finishes with 3.45 ERA. The 2.48 FIP during that season suggests that he was just more of a victim of bad luck. And honestly, the Mets defense was never that great behind him in 2021. So he reduces his walk rate nicely, but his strikeout rate also goes down a lot. And he's actually the second lowest of his career during this time, 12.8, which is still very good. He finishes with 89 strikeouts and 62 two-thirds innings pitched, but he's not really pitching in the same manner that you expect him to. And he's coming up on a free agent year going into 2022. And there are a lot of, there's a lot of talk. Do you keep this guy around? Do you ship him away? I'll be honest. I honestly thought they're not going to keep him around. There was just too much uncertainty when he was entering games, and it felt like they should just cut bait at that point and say, this is not going to work out for us. It doesn't matter how talented he is. He just cannot pitch in New York. And he can do fine on the road. Maybe he deserves to be somewhere else where it's a little bit less intense than pitching in New York. I'm completely wrong in this case. He delivers the greatest season from a reliever in Mets history without question. There's no discussion on the matter. His season 2022 is absolutely spectacular. He finishes the year with a 1.31 ERA, only 32 saves, and that's mostly because the Mets were blowing out so many of their opponents during this season. He just wasn't getting into games a lot, but helpfully he only blows 3 saves, which is very good. It's the 3 blown saves are the fewest that he has in some time for a full season. He just has fewer opportunities in this case, but it's really a terrific performance from him. And when he's in the game, he is almost unstoppable. He performs better than he does in his breakout 2018 season, where again he saved 57 games, incredible strikeout rate. He blows away that strikeout rate in this season. Finishes with a 17.1 strikeout per 9 inning rate, a .90 FIP. That's absolutely insane. That is with a 1.31 ERA and a .90 FIP. That's insane. He's just unstoppable on the mound, and he is not letting anybody get on base. Very few base hits allowed during this time. 34 base hits allowed in 62 innings. An insane 118 strikeouts during this time, with only 18 walks, only 3 home runs allowed, only 9 earned runs allowed for the entire season. It is a monster year, and he cashes in at the perfect time. The Mets very quickly re-sign him to a nice big deal that he very much deserved, and Edwin Diaz is now the closer of the future. So this is a move that has started off as a absolutely classic Met screw up. Oh, you trade away the top prospect, and Jarred Kelenic was, as I recall, made some waves on his way out. Him and his family were kind of talking about the Mets negatively. They felt like this guy who the Mets had drafted, he was going to be better than the guys that they just acquired, and that Edwin Diaz and Robinson Cano were not as good as he was going to be. And he makes a lot of talk, and honestly, it's paying off for him in the first couple of years of this trade. because Diaz is so all over the place, and Kelenic is just a rising star. In their respective 2022s, it's clear that Diaz had the much better year. Kelenic gets sent down halfway through his call up in 2022, and there are flashes of talent with Kelenic. I don't know for sure if Kelenic's going to be an all-star. I would say he's got some growing up to do still in terms of his approach to the play, because he's striking out at an insane rate. And if Edwin Diaz met him, let's say 100 times, I'd say he would strike him out maybe 90 of those times. And maybe Kelenic would get lucky every once in a while and get a base hit or a home run. But there's no question that Edwin Diaz right now is baseball's top reliever. He is one of the biggest stars in baseball, and his entrance with coming out to the narco music by Timmy Trumpet is just insane moment where there is that talk. Where is this better than Mariano Rivera coming out to enter Sandman in the ninth inning? It's close. He hasn't done nearly what Rivera has done, so to talk about them in the same breath is not correct. But Edwin Diaz is very clearly a huge star right now, a guy who deserves to be celebrated and paid like that. And I love what they've gotten for him. So this has been a excellent acquisition by the New York Mets that has aged very nicely for them, and they're really reaping the benefits of having this superstar closer who is going to looks like he's going to be poised for another great year this year, and we certainly hope he'll continue doing that for the next few years of his contract. So moving on to number 5, and number 5 is going to be interesting to some people, I'm sure. So number 5, I chose Johan Santana, and Johan Santana probably many would assume would be lower on this list. I choose him for number 5 because of one simple reason, which is that his health is not great during this time. He makes some big moments with the Mets, and I'll go into those in a minute, but I want to talk about when the Mets had actually acquired Santana. So when they bring him in 2008, it is a February deal, so this is late in the offseason, and spring training is about to start soon. The Mets are in need of a pitcher. Tom Glavine is departing at this point. You're left with a staff that is kind of low in terms of dependable pitching stars. I remember we had still John Maine and Oliver Perez at this time, and they really needed a guy who could really lead the staff. So they make a huge trade during this time to acquire Johan Santana from the Minnesota Twins. Santana was coming off a incredible run from 04 to 07, where he was, without question, baseball's best pitcher. There is nobody who can really shine a candle to him. He is absolutely spectacular during that time, and comes away with a lot of hardware. Two Cy Young awards. He finishes 3rd and 5th the other 2 years. Wins a Gold Glove in 07, and people are looking at him as a guy who is going to be a huge star for the years to come. The Mets trade for him and acquire him through a trade that sends away a number of prospects, most notably Carlos Gomez. And Gomez, everyone well aware now, has had a long career, about 10 years long, and with mixed success. And ultimately, I think the Mets, even with Santana's run not going very long, did come away with the best of that deal, because the Minnesota Twins ultimately did not keep Carlos Gomez for very long. But talking about Santana now, Santana has that first year with New York, and his first year with New York is excellent. He finishes with a 16-7 record, 2.53 ERA, leads the league in innings pitched, 234 in a third inning. He sees his strikeout rate drop down a little bit. It was 9.7 in 07 with the Twins. It goes down to 7.9 with the Mets in 2008. However, he does deliver what looks like a excellent year all across the board, and is definitely viewed, again, still as maybe baseball's best pitcher. He leads the league in ERA with 2.53, finishes the year with a third place Cy Young vote finish. So he was certainly being viewed as a elite star, and the Mets don't make the playoffs that year. It is not due to Santana at all. Santana puts the Mets on his back for that entire year, especially in the late stretch where the Mets were again blowing their lead to the Philadelphia Phillies, and we see Santana deliver this heroic performance in his final start of the season, and it's a great indicator of where his career is going to go, which is that he can deliver these huge moments for them. Unfortunately, his body just cannot hold out ultimately, and his 2009 2010 seasons are unfortunately dealing with a lot of injuries. So he is struggling with reduced performance. He is not able to strike out guys at the same rate that he was during his prime years with Minnesota. Staying healthy, he's still able to pitch a ultimately strong season in 2010. 09, he's just gone for a good portion of the year, only makes 25 starts that season, 166 innings pitched. 2010, he does make 29 starts, 199 innings pitched. But the results are coming up a little short. He's coming with good ERAs in both seasons, but you're wishing that he was on the field more, and unfortunately, it does result in the Mets kind of missing this premier pitcher who is being paid a lot of money by the Mets. They had signed him to a huge contract extension when they had traded for him, and it's not really going the right way at this point. Ultimately, he misses the entire 2011 season, comes back in 2012, and of course pitches his no-hitter during that season, but that is the lone highlight of that year. He is a horrible mess for the entire season, going 6-9, a 4.85 ERA, and he was just not getting results. A 4.09 FIP that same year. He sees his striker rate jump up a little bit more, but he's just not able to pitch at the same level. And even though he is only 33 at this time, he ultimately fails to make any more starts for the team. He is just riddled with injuries during this period. His final start coming in August 17th. With the New York Mets in 2012, and that was the final start of his career, and he unfortunately gets shelled in that game, so it ultimately was not a successful performance. And this is kind of what we're left with. So this is why Santana is not very high on the list, even though the caliber player that the Mets had acquired and his ultimately very successful run with the team was, largely successful during this time. He ultimately just got from what the Mets were expecting and what they ultimately got. He's better than Pedro Martinez, but not as good as he should have been. And it was a trade that really should have gone better. I wish it had gone better. Yohan Santana, I still think very highly of, and I think he was a guy who unfortunately will never get really recognition of his career because it was just a brief 5-6 year run in the league where he just was the absolute premier starting pitcher. And unfortunately, none of those years really carried over with the Mets except for the first year. So, what could have been a very successful run, unfortunately, we get more of an abbreviated run, very typical of the Mets. So he will only number 5 on this list. So, still love Yohan Santana, but just could have been much better. Number 4 will be Max Scherzer. I'm not going to talk that very long about Scherzer because he doesn't have a very long Mets career so far. We've seen great things from Max Scherzer when he's on the mound. It's about him staying on the mound now. Does need to be mentioned. But Max Scherzer has delivered some great moments for the Mets already. There was his flirting with the no-hitter in 2022 when the Mets had acquired him. I remember it being a huge moment. Like, that was just people just like flabbergasted that they brought in this, 3-time Cy Young Award winner, future Hall of Famer. Players like that generally never fell to the Mets, and they paid through the nose for him. But he, when healthy, definitely gave results that delivered. In that first season, he goes 11-5, 2.29 ERA, 173 strikeouts, and 145 innings pitched. I mean, terrific numbers across the board and really in line with his entire career. So he's not showing Father Time at this point. Unfortunately, he does have to deal with a couple of injuries during the run, and there are these what moments where you think, oh, okay, this could go bad for them. I wonder if he's not going to be able to pitch. He ultimately finishes the season with the team, but by the end of the year, you feel like he wasn't maintaining himself as well as you could hope. This is not to say that he was in bad shape, but Max Scherzer by the end of the year really needed, I think, to kind of step back, and they ultimately could not do that because they were in the middle of a division race and a playoff race with the Atlanta Braves. So it was imperative that he need to be starting every fifth day. And by the end of the year, you can see he was just totally gassed by the time he got to the playoffs because the Mets had just leaned on him so hard during that final stretch of the season. So we get a pitcher who has definitely looked like a top star, and if he can stay healthy for the entire season, I think the Mets will definitely benefit from him. And unquestionably, there's been great stuff from him already. He has a 5.2 WAR in 2022. I mean, that's not nothing. He was having an amazing year and was probably would have been involved in the Cy Young voting more had he stayed healthy the entire season. His combination with Justin Verlander, who again will not factor into this list because the Mets just acquired him, Max Scherzer and Verlander at the top of the rotation is fascinating. It is a definitely healthy gamble. No one knows how exactly that's going to play out for the Mets. I certainly hope will be a huge success. If it isn't, we'll see how that goes. It's definitely going to be a situation where people are going to be looking at them and like, I hope they hold up. I hope their bodies can hold up. This is a full season, not to mention the playoff run that the Mets are hoping to go into. And they have to be given their best stuff. And this is coming in a tricky year, certainly, with the addition of the pitch clock. And we've seen how Scherzer's kind of battled with that already. Scherzer is a bulldog on the mound. There's no question. That has been his MO for his entire career. He's a guy who battles and is a completely no-nonsense pitcher. I think it should also be said that Max Scherzer, as a leader, is spectacular. Max Scherzer is unquestionably a great leader of men. And you can see that the way he just holds court in the dugout and in practices with the other Mets pitchers. And everybody just listens to him because they respect him. They know how he's been there. He's done everything really that he needs to do in his career. There's really nothing else that he needs to do. He wants to win another World Series and do it with the Mets. I definitely applaud him for being so flexible in terms of everything that the Mets have asked him to do. And I think his relationship with the team, he has fit in perfectly. I think there was a lot of trepidation when they first acquired him that it wasn't going to work out well. But Scherzer's delivered in a incredible fashion. I think this upcoming season he'll deliver another terrific performance. It's just a matter of how much we're actually going to see of him. And again, this is going to go into them sort of having the game manage him at times and being like, you're going to have to only go 5 innings at this point because we can't have you go 7 innings because we need to kind of save your arm. And it may result in a couple
Mm-hmm.
losses. Something Scherzer I know hates. He is the definition of a gamer. He wants to stay out there and win and pitch for his team. He also helpfully recognizes when he cannot perform and when something is wrong, which is always good. I always like that as a pitcher, seeing that in a pitcher. But there is the question of how much the Mets can get out of him, and we can only hope that he can get at least a full season in and can also help the Mets ultimately win a World Series before he is gone from the team. So whether or not that is this year, we have to see. But I've liked everything that we've seen from Max Scherzer on the mound so far.